friends and fellow world builders, my name is AJ Winters and welcome back to World Builder. Today we're looking back over our regions and exploring the trading and diplomacy between them. Now I've been researching into a few different trade routes in our own world, as well as adding different trade goods into societies and seeing how it changes them. So, let's get to discovering how these regions in the world we're creating have influenced each other and maybe even flesh out some more of our map, shall we? First off, let's check back in with the map that we've been working with. So far for the last 15 episodes, we've been honing in on the Trilands, and that's because they're the most advanced region in Aelwyn. Within just this one region here, they have a range of trades that they share amongst the three cities to survive. Penavwa, offering their vast agriculture, crops, materials, pottery, and silks. The city of Austin, providing metalwork and academics, as well as Austenite. And then the river city, which we're still yet to name, being the fishermen and artisans. What we also know is that the Trilands have a very tense relationship with Crestfell, down south, being that Crestfell launched a war against them at some point in their history, and that was the reason that the Trilands formed the Accords and fought against them. So I'm interested to see what the relationship and trading agreement is like with Crestfell now, post-war. Which brings me to this city down here. This is the newest city in the Trilands and acts as a reformed borderline between the two regions, a stronghold per se. But it's also on the other side of the Elsewood, meaning that their culture and access to the three main cities of the Trilands is actually cut off. How does that change the culture within that city? And does that mean that this once stronghold against Crestfell actually has a better relationship with them than the Trilands itself? Interesting. The Elsewood is also dense and dangerous to traverse through due to the Skorgsil and the other beasts and creatures within the forest. So we need to work out how these cities travel to each other. And in that, potentially also working out how they travelled and defended the Trilands during the war with Crestfell. There are two options. Either they travelled through the mountainside, which is a long and arduous journey, or they risk going through the forest. And maybe that was Crestfell's mistake. They were vulnerable to the animals and creatures within the Elsewood in the first place, but having the Trilands forces move through the mountains and meet them head-on behind them really messed them over in the war. So now I want to check back in with the other regions, namely the Fire Islands, my favourite of the regions. So since we've created some very important spice and/or herb that grows on the Fire Islands, we know that they're a significant point on the map for trading. So we have created a small city that lies on the outskirts of the desert region, in which the city of Penavwa and/or the Trilands can cross across to then ship travel towards the Fire Islands for trade. We haven't given the city a name, however, so if you have any ideas for this ship dockyard trading port town, then leave them down below in the comments. This leads me to thinking about three crucial points. One, what other nations and regions trade with the Fire Islands? Because it can't just be the Trilands. Maybe Crestfell, maybe even these islands to the southwest. We don't even know what those islands to the southwest do and/or are yet, so that's going to be interesting to tap into. Do Kylandri have some sort of access route? Kylandri being the tropical region to the northeast of Aelwyn. I'm also going to say that the Fire Islands are an independent nation. The second point in my thought process here is that the desert region we've created to the west of the continent is incredibly tough to travel through, and was the original location of the Ratu Tor, in which Venonfel travelled to the mountains that later became Austin. So maybe we should also work out where Venonfel used to exist. Is it these islands to the southwest, or did Crestfell take over what used to be Venonfel? I think Venonfel needed to exist somewhere here in order for them to traverse through the desert region all the way up to the mountains of Austin. Keeping in mind that this significant ritualistic journey that they made on their Ratu tour became such a fundamental part of the national pride of Venonfel, so much so that a part or group of them moved to the mountainsides that then became the city of Austin. So maybe we'll put the Venonfel capital here. And maybe that city is also completely abandoned now, but it became part of Crestfell when the city was fallen. Ooh, which also means that maybe Crestfell used this abandoned city of Venonfel as their porting and trading town to the Fire Islands. I like that. I think we also have to have something here from the Southern Islands. Ooh, the Southern Islands. I'm going to put that down as a draft name for now. Okay, so we've got a clearer understanding of the Fire Islands, knowing that we've got 3 different points that come in for trade access. That creates a very multicultural lifestyle on these islands as well, which I'm really intrigued to tap into. We also know that the Elswood is incredibly dangerous to travel through, which means that a lot of the trading routes would actually descend down through the mountainsides. I think that's an interesting point because the mountains almost isolate the Trilands a little bit. Not only just for protection, but in the sense that in order to trade and travel with the Trilands, that's a sentence. One side of the mountain range is an incredibly dangerous forest with the Skorgzeel protecting it at every stand, and the other side of the mountain range is a desolated desert left behind from the War of the Gods. So yeah, you would need to travel through the mountains. So hypothetically, we haven't made a capital city of Crestfell yet, but if we were to put them here, near to the river and close to the mountains, they would have to travel up through the mountains. Their first stop would probably be the stronghold to gather supplies and or rest for the night. And since there's more of an amicable relationship between the two nations now, post-war, I think that's safe to say that that would be their best option. Next, they would have to travel through the mountains all the way up to get to either Penavwa or further up in order to get to Austin. From there, they could take a riverboat down to the river city. So that's a pretty long journey, and that makes for interesting travel stories as well. One thing I found really interesting when researching into the Silk Road, for example, is travel and trade across a large continent doesn't necessarily just mean trade goods. It also means the swapping of ideas. And also diseases, but that's a different story. Ideas and religion were also shared along the Silk Road. Next, I want to look at the 2 regions to the north. We haven't even begun to explore these regions. The only thing we know so far is that the northwest region is Ethid territory. Now, I also think that the Ethids are nomadic in some way, so I think they travel a lot. However, I was thinking that this colder region up here, there is almost a natural border made by this giant lake and mountainside right here, which makes me think that there is some sort of nation or city around this area, and that it would need to be traversed through this difficult area to get either into Kylandry or further down the mountains to Austin. Okay, I like that. We also know that this giant forest here is almost the size of Elswood, so maybe we need to look into what exists in that forest. Something we created when we tapped into these regions back in episode 3 was that the colder region kind of lives to the northwest, but on the northeast side there is a tropical region brought in by the heat moving down from the equator. So, Kylandry is going to be quite a hot area, and it makes me think about this city here. Is it a beachfront town? Do they have a good relationship with the river city? And what does Kylandry offer? Well, one thing we do know is that Kylandri is home to the Brass Towers, which we created in a world-building session over in Twicce. So thank you so much to my Twitch chat for helping me with this passage right here. Situated to the north are 3 standing brass towers, like chimes against the harsh winds of the shores. Isolated, no creature or man visits these towers unless desperate. The halls of unbound knowledge, a twisted gift from Ethra, the god of knowledge himself. A rare flower grows outside the brass towers, on the frost-covered floors and stone. A vibrant red orchard grown from the blood of the sacrifices the patrons within give. Not a sound nor bird can be heard in proximity to the great towers, as if no living creature can stand to be near them. Ethra, the god of knowledge, is not one to be dismissed or ignored. He trades in secrets, blood, and undying devotion. Those that operate within the brass towers are followers of his, people dedicated to knowledge itself over life. For what is known can be more powerful than any mage. This gives me an idea. I think that maybe Kylandri has access to some metals and golds. So maybe this land right here, where these mountains start thinning out, is home to gold, stones, emeralds, topaz? I think a variety of gems, and maybe we can tap into that a little bit later when we expand more on Kylandri. This episode is just leaving me with more questions than it is answers, but it's really fleshing out some of the significant points of Aelwyn. So let's break it down. We know that the city of Austin offers us Austenite. We know that they offer us metal and academics. We know that the river city gives us fish, artisans, and also Titan trout leather. And we know Penavwa gives us fruit, vegetables, nuts, bread, pottery, and silks. We know that this area here gives us gold, gems, and I want to say topaz. The Fire Islands gives us spice. Probably different types of fish as well, given that it's an island nation. I'm going to say some sort of fruit as well, like figs. Then we know that Crestfell offers us wine. Crestfell could probably also give us beer, be home to breweries. I think they would also give us the most meat. Having this all laid out in this way starts making me think about building materials as well. For example, with the city of Penavwa, do they collect wood from the Elsewood, or do they avoid it because it's a precious land area that the Skorgsil protect? Maybe they use stone instead, so we need to work out where the stone comes from. I think this area right here would give us stone. Maybe even the surrounding areas of Austin as well. Kylandri might actually use wood from the forests surrounding it. As it is a really tropical region, I think that really changes the architecture of Kylandri as well. We also know that they have the brass towers, so maybe they make structures out of both metals and materials as well as the rainforests around them. That's going to be really interesting when we start digging into architecture of Kylandri. How exciting. Okay. And then lastly, we know that this colder region up here is actually isolated from the rest of the continent. But what do they fish and or mine or trade or build within their own region? I'm going to say something along the lines of fur, being that I think that there are bigger creatures that live in the colder regions. Some sort of mammoth-like creature makes sense to me. I also think that this lake would provide fish again, and maybe this mountainside, being that it is also in that area, would be your golds and or metals as well. I'm really happy with where we're at with this map. I do have a few more follow-up questions with the Ethid territory to the west of the Trilands, but I think we can explore that more when we dive into the Ethids. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. If you liked it, hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date when new videos come out. If you want to stay up to date with all the extracurricular activities we do outside of this world building series, then you can follow us on all of the socials. Or you can subscribe to our Patreon where you get access to behind the scenes content as well as downloadable PDFs of anything we create on this channel. Or you can join our Discord community where we do daily world building prompts and have a thriving community of creatives at your fingertips. This is just the beginning of the world building journey, and next week we're going to be diving into that colder region to the north, which we haven't really worked out anything about yet. But until then, I'll see you next week.